Sveiki! Ar žinote, kodėl norime niurkyti mielus gyvūnėlius? Kur į šiaurę rodytų kompasas, jeigu būtume šiaurės ašigalyje? Kodėl negalime čiaudėti atsimerkę ir kas buvo prieš didįjį sprogimą? Dr.Karl arba daktaras Karlas atsakymams net į pačius netikėčiausius ir komiškiausius klausimus paskyrė 40 savo karjeros metų, o jo vizitinė kortelė yra gyvos klausimų ir atsakymų apie mokslo laidas, kokia yra ir ši. Šiandien jau antrą kartą su juo bandysime atsakyti į klausimus, kuriuos siuntėte po praėjusios laidos, o jei jūs ar jūsų vaikai turite įdomių klausimų, jos drąsiai galite užduoti dabar viso eterio metu Delfi Facebook paskyroje. Labai raginu tai ir padaryti, o dabar ir pristatau. Hello Karl and welcome back to Vilnius for the second time. Are you excited?
This is absolutely wonderful. I'm having so much fun. This is terrific.
Great, perfect. So my first question is, what was before the Big Bang?
Well, we are pretty confident that the Big Bang actually happened because of three major pieces of data. Firstly, the universe is expanding. Secondly, we have measured what's called the cosmic background radiation. Kind of like you get a big rock, you throw it into a pond, the ripples go, they gradually die down. They're the ripples that we're still picking up from the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. And the third piece of data, convincing us that the Big Bang actually happened, is that in the universe today, about 90% of the atoms are hydrogen atoms and about 10% are helium atoms, and the rest is just little bits of stuff, you and me, iron, oxygen, carbon, etc. Now, we know what happened after the Big Bang at certain times. So, at 380,000 years after the Big Bang, things had cooled down so much that atoms condensed with their nuclei, the solid centre, and the electrons going around. That was at 380,000 years of age. At 280 million years of age, the first stars started burning. What happened before the Big Bang? And the answer is we do not know. First, Roger Penrose, who won a Nobel Prize in physics this year, about 10 years ago, he announced that in the cosmic background radiation, that he had picked up some sort of information that maybe gave us a hint as to something before the Big Bang, and everybody was very excited, and we looked carefully, false alarm, nothing there. So, on that regard, we have no idea. But consider this. In quantum mechanics, something can come from nothing, providing that it happens for a short enough period of time. So you can have nothingness, and then out of that nothingness can come a particle and an antiparticle. They combine and they vanish. And providing that happens for a short enough period of time, then it can happen. Not just in theory, but in practice. We have actually recorded this happening in real life. Is our Big Bang one universe, and maybe there's another anti-universe somewhere else, and then in a while they'll combine and then vanish? We don't know. Bottom line, we do not know what came before the Big Bang.
Wow, that is really interesting. Aš primenu, kad klausimus Dr. Karl galite užduoti gyvai viso eterio metu Delfi Facebook paskyroje. And now back to you, Karl. We've got a question from the audience. Where would a compass show north if we are standing in the North Pole?
I almost did this experiment on one of my 5 trips to Antarctica.
Wow.
And I tried to organise that the ship taking us to Antarctica would go over the South Magnetic Pole. And when you're at the South Magnetic Pole, the compass points straight into the ground. So consider a ball. This is a ball. This is the Earth. And the magnetic field lines go like this. South Pole, North Pole. Here, they are parallel to the equator. But here they go straight into the surface at the North Pole and the South Pole. Now, the North and South magnetic poles are not lined up with the spin or geographic pole. The North Magnetic Pole is up past the top right-hand corner of Canada, heading that away at about 50 kilometres per year. We don't know why. The South Magnetic Pole is on a line roughly between the South Geographic Pole and the city of Adelaide, and in the early part of the last century it was on the Antarctic continent, but now it's at sea. And I tried to convince the ship that we just divert a little bit and go over the South Magnetic Pole to see the compass pointing straight down, but there were various reasons that we couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Another very interesting question, why do we want to squeeze cute things?
I have heard various explanations. You come to an incredibly wonderful child or a dog and you want to squeeze it so much. There are many explanations. I do not know. There's a name for it. This is not in a hard science such as mathematics or physics, but rather a soft science such as psychology. Many reasons are given. None of them convinced me. I don't know. But I know that it happens to me. Does it happen to you, Dr. Godya?
Yes, I always want to squeeze something cute, especially dogs.
Yes. Why? I don't know. It's irrational, because all you can do is make it uncomfortable or maybe squash it too much. I do not know.
Yeah, so going back to another topic, healing crystals. We have companies in Lithuania that sell crystals and pretend or claim that they are healing us somehow. What does science know about the healing powers of rocks, basically?
Zero. There is zero proof that they work in any way whatsoever. On the other hand, maybe the placebo effect will help. Placebo comes from the Latin "I shall heal." And if you believe it will heal, in 30% of cases, it does. And providing the crystal is cheap enough and they have no side effects, then if it makes you feel better and you can afford it, go for it, but don't think that it's real. I came across the incredible power of the placebo effect when I was a junior doctor in a small hospital outside of Sydney in the emergency department between midnight and dawn. And there was just the nurse and me running the hospital, well, the emergency. And a patient came in whom I already knew. I knew that he had terrible kidney pain and that he was going to have kidney stone operation tomorrow. And he had come in the day before and I'd given him some painkillers and he went back again. He went home. And now it was 2 o'clock in the morning and he came in and he had this terrible pain on his face. It was just terrible. And I recognised him. I said, "Is it the kidney stones causing pain?" And he said, "Yes, Karl." I said, "Well, come on in, we'll do the paperwork later." I just took a few notes and then I asked the nursing sister to get some painkiller. Now I had him up on the bed and I had put a needle into his arm and I was ready, and she came and whispered into my ear and she said, "I'm sorry, there's no painkiller left. I found some in ward 25. I'll run down and get some. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Is that okay?" And I said, the patient, did not hear any of this. And I said, "Yes, of course, thank you very much, that would be lovely." And so she takes off. She goes for the painkiller. And I have a patient in front of me. Number one, on a previous occasion, I had got rid of his pain. Number two, he was in terrible pain. Number three, I had read about the placebo effect. And so with a whole lot of ceremony and theatre, I said, "Well, here we go. And I injected salt water into him, saline, but with lots of ceremony. And as I did so, the pain just fell off his face. And he just went, oh, that's so much better. And his heart rate went from about 120 down to about 60. The nursing sister came back. She had the painkiller. And I said, look, I didn't lie to him. I said, I'll just finish off. And I gave him his first dose of painkiller, and his body behaved like I had given him 2 doses. And he tried to drop dead on me. His heart rate went 60, 50, 40, 30. And the sister and I were looking at each other. Of course, we had Narcan, the drug that would immediately reverse the opiate, and we were prepared to use it. But then his heart rate came back up to 35, 40, lub-dub, lub-dub. And so now it's 2:15 in the morning. He's snoring. He's had what he thinks is a double dose of opiate. What do? Do we give him the reversing drug and wake him up? No, we just leave him. So for the rest of the morning, we just had him on the trolley, and wherever we went, we just towed him with us. And he woke up in the morning and then had the operation later that evening, and everything was fine. So that was my experience with the power of the placebo. So if the crystals are cheap enough and they've got no bad side effects, if it works for you, go for it. But scientifically, they got nothing.
But what if somebody needs a serious medical help, but they choose crystals or some other alternative medicine instead?
If the placebo effect is powerful enough, that's good. But it's not always powerful enough. It works only about 1/3 or 1/4 of the time, and usually only the first time round. And in general, it might stop you from getting proper medical care. But in an emergency, if I had no painkiller and I had to relieve somebody's pain, I would try it. I would try anything just to try to make the patient feel better. But you are 100% correct. The placebo is not a reliable way to go, apart from the fact that the side effects are fairly minimal or low. However, you can invoke the nocebo effect, N-O-C-I-B-O effect, where you take something that has no pharmacological value and it can make you worse. That happens too. In general, stick to real medicine. Medicine that works is Western medicine, is real medicine. Ignore the placebos and the crystals.
As a science communicator, why do you think people believe in healing crystals, horoscopes, but don't believe in science facts? Like, for example, many people still doubt climate change.
I think it is the power of the tribe. So I've come across this myself, where I've been interested in buying, say, a toaster. So I get the magazines and read them all about the toaster, and there's this toaster and that one. And after looking at all the costs and the advantages, I decide on this particular toaster. But if 2 of my friends, or 3, say, hey, I bought this other toaster and it's terrific, I will follow my friends. The tribe is very powerful inside our brains. We humans are social creatures. So if you belong to the East Vilnius Sewing Club, you might accept the 6 times multiplication tables and the 8 times multiplication tables, but not the 7 times multiplication tables, because you belong to the East Vilnius Sewing Club. On the other hand, the West Vilnius Sewing Club, they do accept the 7 times multiplication tables. They do believe that 7 times 2 is 14. So there's this strong tribal need among us that we want to have acceptance from the people around us. And if they believe something, we'll go along with it just to be part of the group. It's much more complicated than that, of course.
Dar kartą primenu, kad klausimus Dr.Karl galite užduoti Delfi Facebook paskyroje savo ar savo vaikų klausimus, bet kokius susijusius su mokslu ar su gyvenimu. And back to you, Karl. What does science know about the afterlife?
We have zero proof of any afterlife. There have been several cases where people have been interested in trying to test it before they died, and they have hidden something, and they have then said that they will come back and tell other people where that thing is. We have never reliably gotten any information from anybody after they have died. We have many anecdotes and stories, but the plural of anecdote is anecdotes, not data. The plural of story is stories, not data. We have zero data to prove that there is any afterlife. On the other hand, all we need is one, and then everything is changed.
Lithuania now is in a really strict lockdown, and we know that COVID-19 related lockdowns and restrictions definitely save lives. But do they also increase the suicide rate?
People have said that there is depression associated with the lockdown. Yes. One of my friends was in Melbourne, and her boyfriend was outside of Melbourne, and she said that she was living in a flat by herself, and she was very sad, and for 5 weeks, she told me, 5 weeks, she had not touched another human being. Luckily, she had a cat, but she had not touched another human being. Now, the good side of that is that in Melbourne, the capital city of Victoria, we went from 500 or 700 cases a day in early August, and that was exactly the same figure as the United Kingdom had in the early August, except Victoria had 5 million people, the United Kingdom had 50 million. Same number of cases in early August. We went into a very hard lockdown, and it turns out that after about 2 weeks, you can see the results. You don't see it at 1 week, you begin to see a flattening of the curve after about 2 weeks. So as of November, they had 30 days in a row with 0 new cases. United Kingdom, 20 to 30,000 a day. Is there an increase in depression? Yes. Is there an increase in suicide? No. Nowhere in the world have we seen an increase in suicide, but people are definitely unhappy. In my case, I was in lockdown here in Sydney with my family, and I was able to be happy because I had my family with me. But if you're in a flat by yourself and you don't touch anybody for 5 weeks, just remember this. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. This time next year, we'll be in some sort of new situation. In Australia, we talk about the new normal. Almost certainly between now and next year, the vaccines will come, and some of them will have side effects, and there will be better vaccines, and there'll be a few spikes. But by this time next year, it'll be pretty well all over. Remember, it's a marathon. Be of good heart.
A while ago, I got a very interesting question from a child, and to be honest, I wasn't able to answer this question. He asked me, what are aliens up to now?
Firstly, we have zero proof that there are any intelligent aliens anywhere in the universe, and we have zero proof that there is any other life anywhere in the universe. However, in our solar system, there are 4 locations, not on Earth, where we have oceans of liquid water underground. Mars and a moon going around the planet Jupiter, the moon called Europa, that has a complete world with water covered entirely by ice. And then, if we go out to the ringed planet Saturn, there are 2 moons that have underground oceans of water. One of them is Titan, and Titan is big. It's bigger than the planet Mercury. And it has surface oceans of liquid methane, the stuff that you burn in a stove, the so-called natural gas. But underground, it has oceans of liquid water. And the really exciting one is the moon called Enceladus, Enceladus. And that's a moon about 300 and something kilometres across, with an ocean maybe 5 to 10 kilometres deep and a few kilometres of ice. And down at the South Pole, there's these stripes in the ice, water ice, not carbon dioxide ice, but water ice. There's stripes that we call tiger claws, as though a claw, like a tiger, has gone and made these scratching marks. And there's fissures, there's scratches in the ice, and coming out is water. 200 kilograms every second. Water with many of the chemicals of life. We've measured the water, we've measured the chemicals of life, we have not seen the life. We have not seen any bacteria. But almost certainly, in those 4 locations, Mars, Europa, Titan and Enceladus, there will be bacterial life. I would bet a whole $1 on it, or even a ruble. Sorry. But intelligent life, not in our solar system. Outside our solar system, I think so. I read a lot of science fiction, and that has twisted my brain to make me think that there will be intelligent life. But as of 2020, we have 0 proof. Do you read much science fiction, Dr. Goda?
Yes, actually, this is my favorite type of literature.
I love science fiction.
Yeah, me as well. Dar kartą primenu, kad Dr.Karl galite užduoti klausimus Delfi Facebook paskyroje savo ar savo vaikų, bet kokius klausimus, kokius turite apie visatą, gyvenimą ar panašiai. And sometimes the rockets take a few hours to get to the International Space Station, and sometimes only a few days. Do you know why?
Yes, because of better technology in measuring. Now, you start off with a rocket, which is a cylinder, a metal cylinder, full of very explosive materials. And at the very pointy end, you have some humans. And then you ignite it, and it takes off. And after 8 minutes, you are 400 kilometres above the ground, travelling horizontally at about 28,800 kilometres per hour. If you had perfect measuring devices, you could come exactly up to the International Space Station and just kiss up against it with 0 velocity, and you'd be there in 8 minutes. But firstly, the International Space Station is very large and very fragile. It's about 100 metres by 20 metres by 50 metres, weighs about 420 tonnes. It's very fragile. You do not want to run into it. Secondly, when you're taking off, there are 2 factors involved with getting you to a certain point in the sky. Firstly, how much thrust are you generating? How much stuff is being squirted out of the rocket engine behind you? And in the old days, we could get that accurate only to be maybe 1%. Now we can get it to maybe 0.1%. If we could get it to 0.01%, then we'd be able to get to our target much more quickly. And then the second thing that changes is the weight or the mass of the rocket. So the thrust gives it a certain push, but all the time you are burning up fuel, and the rocket is getting lighter and lighter and lighter. And so the same amount of thrust will give a bigger push to a rocket that weighs less. So at the moment, using our better measuring technologies, we can get there in about 3 hours, but in a few years' time, maybe we could get down to 1 hour. So you just do one go, and you just immediately get there within an hour and a half or so. But even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, it would take 2 days. So you'd get into orbit and then gradually sort of adjust it a little bit at a time, because you did not want to run into the International Space Station. You did not. Oh, by the way, is the weather good in your part of the world? And are you able to see the meteor shower? I think it's the Geminids in the early morning.
Yeah.
Are your skies clear?
Now, not really. Now we are in this gray sky area of the year, actually, and we are not able to see a lot of the sky and enjoy meteor showers as well. And now going back to Earth, I have spoken to a couple of neuroscientists about dreams, and as I understood, we don't really know why we dream. Do you know anything about dreams and why we dream?
Well, firstly, I am not an expert in any single field. So I do have 16 years of university education with degrees in physics and maths and engineering and medicine and surgery.
Wow.
And also 4 years of non-degree study in computer science, astrophysics, philosophy and electrical engineering. But what I do is I read the scientific literature very widely. And there's an interesting theory, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, and it relates to the fact that people like you and me and everybody else spends a lot of time interested in stuff that is not true. So, for example, you and I spend a lot of time reading science fiction.
Yeah.
And other people spend a lot of time reading, watching movies, going to plays, telling each other scary stories. Why? Well, the brain does the same thing when you're dreaming, and it's making up dreams that are not very richly textured, so you don't have all of the fine detail, but you just get a sort of a broad view. But also, they are fictional. And the latest theory is that these dreams are a kind of noise to stop our brains from getting too specialised. So suppose that you are, for example, a carpenter. You're a carpenter and you have only one tool, a hammer. And that's all you can use. Well, for every problem, you'll try to use your hammer, whether it's banging a nail or making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. And if you have the dreams happening during the night, and if in the daytime you are interested in fictional stuff, you break loose your mind from its rigid patterns and you begin to think to outside. And you think, well, maybe I can use the handle of my hammer as a lever to bend something. So the latest theory, which may or may not be true, is that dreams are a kind of noise that's injected into your brain to make your brain flexible, to be able to adjust, deal with something that's brand new, like COVID-19.
Really interesting. Do you dream every night, Karl?
Yes, everybody dreams in a period of time called REM, standing for rapid eye movement sleep. This happens every 1.5 hours. So you're wide awake, and then you go down into deep sleep, and then after 1.5 hours, you're in rapid eye movement sleep. And if you sneak up on somebody and have a look at their eyes, their eyelids are shut. But you'll see that underneath their eyelids, their corneas are going like that, left, right, like they are watching an invisible tennis match on the inside of their eyelids. And that's when you do your major dreaming. And when you're doing this dreaming, the part of your brain in the hippocampus that is involved with very precise memories, you don't have access to that anymore. You can't put stuff in there, and you can't listen or remember memories from the past. And then you go down again, another 1.5 hours later, at the 3-hour mark, you'll have a longer one, and then at 4.5 hours, and then 6 hours and so forth. You keep on having longer and longer periods of dreams. And if you wake up straight after the REM sleep, you will remember your dream briefly, but you also dream in between, and you tend not to remember those dreams, and we don't fully understand why.
Now my last question for this time, of course. I expressed my affection for dogs at the beginning of our conversation, and there are many exciting things about dogs. For instance, in Finland, they are being used to sniff COVID-19 at the airports, and they can detect the disease 5 days prior showing any symptoms. And it turns out that they have personalities. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, firstly, with the dogs being able to sniff the disease, yes. There's a long history of various sorts of animals being able, with their superior noses, being able to sniff things that we cannot. There's a part of the brain called the olfactory epithelium. Olfactory epithelium, it's high up here in the nose. In the humans, it's about the size of a thumbnail. In a dog, it's about this big. In a cat, it's about that big. And so cats have a potentially better sense of smell. So certainly it is very possible that animals, such as dogs, can detect diseases such as COVID-19. Unfortunately, the dogs get exhausted after about 3/4 of an hour, and they have to have a break before they then come back again. We will be developing artificial noses tied to some sort of artificial intelligence to work for us. We haven't got there yet. Secondly, there's just on the smell thing, we've found one case of a woman who can smell Parkinson's disease in a person about 5 years before it happened.
What?
And one day she started saying to her husband, "You smell differently." Showers, different diet, made no difference. After 5 years, he developed Parkinson's disease. Then, a little bit later, she went with her husband to a place where a whole lot of people with Parkinson's disease were, Parkinson's disease help group. And as she got out of the car, she could just smell the Parkinson's disease. And it turns out that she can smell it. We don't know how.
How
We're still
accurate
learning.
was she?
Well, they're still doing the tests, but it does seem that she can detect Parkinson's disease in a person 5 years before they begin to have any symptoms.
Wow.
Now, with the dogs, it turns out that dogs have a bunch of different aspects to their personality: cheerful, sad, interested in new things, or bored, highly excitable, or very sleepy, phlegmatic, etc. And they mimic their owners, and we don't know why. Is it because the dog and the owner gradually get closer together, somewhere in the middle, or is it that the owner buys a dog that suits their personality? Probably the first one, but we're still looking at it. But definitely dogs have personalities, and the theory of the old days, half a century ago, the dogs and insects were just bundles of reflexes that would eat when they were hungry and sleep when they were tired. We don't believe that at all anymore. No. Dogs and even spiders and insects have their own personalities. Do they have consciousness? Ooh, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
The philosophers argue about that a lot.
Even spiders have their own personalities?
Sure. So there are some spiders that are hunting spiders, And there's a spider called a Portia, like Portia in that Shakespearean play, The Merchant of Venice, Portia. And they are hunting spiders, and if you trick them, they will stop for a second and then think about it and then go on. We use this concept of the sudden stop in their behaviour to try to work out what babies are thinking, if babies are surprised. So you might have a baby, and over here you've got the two parents and a bunch of children. And then the baby turns away, and at that moment you quickly pull away the children and one parent, and all that is there is one parent. And the baby turns back. It goes, ah! And it stops what it's doing. And then it thinks, ah, something's changed, I'll just go on with life. And that way we know that the baby is aware of the difference between one person and four people. And spiders show exactly the same behaviour. If you've got this spider, and over here is some food, and on its way there, you change the food, it just stops and thinks, it's a different number. And then it thinks, mathematics is one thing, but I'm still hungry, and it goes and eats it anyway. Do they actually have personalities? We're not sure yet, but we do know that spiders can have a mind map. So they have a tree here and a tree there, and they throw a web across, the wind carries it across, and they go across, down, down, and they gradually build up a map of this area where they're going to put the web, and then they build the web, and they change the web. So if on each of the last 3 days, in this part of the web there's been an insect that has flown through it, they make the web a bit stronger. But having a personality, maybe I was a bit too pushy there, but they definitely have the ability to count, and they have a mind map. Now, spiders can only count 1 or 2 or more than 2. Mm-hmm. But if spiders could count to 4 with 8 legs, they could be the world's best drummer.
Spiders don't stop surprising me. Thank you, Karl. It was really fun to have you back in Vilnius, and see you soon next time.
And to be of good strength, remember it takes 2 weeks between something happening with COVID-19 and the results. It's a marathon. Be strong. We'll all get through it. Bye-bye.
We will be strong. Thank you.
Pasakų kalėdos Vilniuje. Kasdien 20 val. Per Delfi TV. Pasakas vaikams seka Lietuvos įžymybės.
O jis tenai yra?